Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. We're diving into Scrum today.
Oh, yeah.
Using excerpts you sent in from Essential Scrum.
Yes, by Kenneth Rubin.
By Kenneth S. Rubin, to really get what makes Scrum tick.
That's right.
Not just what it is, but how it works.
Yeah.
And the why behind it.
Exactly.
So we're talking improved ROI.
Yes.
Reduced costs.
Yeah.
And even more joy.
More joy.
According to this book.
Absolutely.
So how does Scrum deliver on these pretty big promises?
Well, it's really all about creating a framework for teams to tackle complex problems.
Okay.
And, I think about traditional project management and how it often, assumes that you can plan everything perfectly up front.
Right.
But, in reality, especially with really innovative projects,
yeah,
that's just not how it works.
Things change all the time.
Exactly. Things change constantly.
Yeah.
Especially in today's fast-paced world.
Yeah.
And that's where Scrum really shines.
Okay.
It's designed for those situations where you need to adapt, you need to learn as you go and make course corrections along the way.
Oh.
That's how you unlock that potential for, increased ROI.
Yeah.
And yes, even more joy in the process.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But Scrum, I feel is most associated with software development.
Right.
Can it apply to other fields as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
While it's true that Scrum gained popularity in the software world, its principles can be applied to any project that involves complexity and uncertainty.
Okay.
We're talking about marketing campaigns, research projects, even planning a big event.
Wow.
Anywhere you need to kind of navigate unknowns and adapt as you go, Scrum can provide a valuable framework.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So Scrum is all about embracing change and adapting?
Yeah.
How does that actually work in practice?
Right.
What does a typical Scrum project look like?
Yeah. So at the heart of Scrum are these things called sprints.
Okay.
Think of them as short, focused bursts of work, usually no more than a month long.
Okay.
And each sprint results in something tangible,
Get it.
a potentially shippable product increment.
Okay.
And this is where the magic of time boxing comes in.
Time boxing. What's that?
Imagine you have a deadline.
Right.
It forces you to prioritize and make tough decisions about what's truly essential.
Yeah.
Time boxing in Scrum does the same thing.
Okay.
It creates a sense of urgency, and it helps teams deliver value quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? That faster delivery often translates into a quicker return on investment.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but what about all the tasks and features and stuff that need to get done?
Right.
How does Scrum handle that?
That's where the product backlog comes in.
Okay.
It's like a master to-do list for your entire project.
Okay.
But it's not static. It's constantly evolving.
Right.
As the team learns more, gets feedback, and adapts to new information.
It's a living document.
It's a living document.
Yeah.
That keeps everyone aligned on what needs to be done and in what order.
So it's prioritizing.
Yes.
Focusing on the most important things first and being open to adjusting the plan as you go.
Exactly.
So that sounds a lot more realistic.
It is.
Than trying to predict everything perfectly up front.
Yeah. There's a great story in the book about John, an extreme skier.
Yep.
He doesn't plan his entire route down the mountain, from the top.
Right.
Instead, he adapts to the terrain and conditions,
Yeah.
making these split-second decisions as he goes.
So Scrum is similar.
Scrum is similar. It's about being responsive, making those course corrections, and finding the best path forward, even when things are unpredictable.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really paints a picture.
It does.
But even with that flexibility, planning still matters.
Absolutely.
So how does Scrum approach planning without, getting bogged down in endless details?
Yeah, it's all about finding the right balance.
Okay.
Scrum encourages upfront planning, but it's not about creating these massive detailed documents that gather dust on a shelf.
Right.
It's about outlining the big picture.
Yeah.
Identifying the key goals and then breaking those goals down into smaller, more manageable chunks that can be tackled within those time-boxed sprints.
So you're saying it's about being strategic with your planning.
Yes.
Focusing on what truly matters and then letting the details kind of emerge as you work through the sprint.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's like packing for a trip.
Okay.
You pack the essentials beforehand, but you also leave room for souvenirs.
Right.
And adjust your luggage based on what you find along the way.
Yeah.
Scrum planning works similarly. It provides a framework and a direction,
Okay.
but it also allows for flexibility and adaptation as you learn and discover new things.
Makes sense. So it's about having a roadmap.
Yeah,
but not being afraid to deviate from it if necessary.
that's right.
So speaking of the journey, let's talk about releases.
Okay.
Traditional project management often focuses on these like big, infrequent releases.
Huge releases.
How does Scrum approach things differently?
One of the key principles of Scrum is delivering value quickly and frequently.
Okay.
Instead of waiting months or even years to release a product,
Yeah.
Scrum encourages smaller, more incremental releases.
Got it.
Think about it. Wouldn't you rather get feedback early and often,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
making adjustments along the way, instead of waiting until the very end to find out that you've built something that doesn't meet the needs of your users?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like testing a recipe
Exactly.
before serving it to guests.
Right.
You get to refine it based on real feedback.
Yes.
So smaller releases,
Yes.
faster feedback,
Yes,
and the ability to course correct more effectively.
absolutely.
So who exactly is involved in this whole Scrum dance?
Yeah.
What kind of team structure are we talking about?
So Scrum keeps the team structure relatively simple, which is one of its strengths.
Okay.
There are 3 core roles.
Bye.
The product owner, who's the voice of the customer and guides the vision. The Scrum Master, who acts as a facilitator and ensures the team follows the Scrum process.
Got it.
And the development team, which is the group of people actually doing the work.
Okay, so we've got our visionary,
Yes.
our guide,
Our guide.
and our doers.
And our doers, that's right.
But how do you measure progress in Scrum?
Yeah.
Is it all about lines of code written
Right.
or hours clocked?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Focusing solely on lines of code or hours worked can be very misleading.
Totally.
Scrum measures progress through velocity,
Okay,
which is essentially the amount of work a team typically completes in a sprint.
got it.
It's not about micromanaging or pushing for unrealistic speed,
Right.
but rather about understanding a team's natural rhythm and using that information to plan realistically.
So velocity is more like a team's average pace,
Yeah,
helping to predict how much they can cover in a sprint.
exactly.
Makes a lot more sense than
No.
just focusing on individual output.
It does.
But what about those times when we're tempted to cut corners to speed things up?
Right.
Is there like a downside to that in Scrum?
Yeah, that brings us to the concept of technical debt, something that can really trip teams up if not managed carefully.
Okay.
Imagine taking shortcuts in building a house.
Okay.
Maybe you skip some essential steps to save time, but then you end up with a leaky roof or unstable foundation.
Yeah, that's going to be expensive to fix later.
Exactly. And it's the same idea with technical debt.
Okay.
Taking shortcuts in your code might seem like a good idea in the short term,
Yeah.
but it can lead to messy, hard-to-maintain code that slows you down in the long run.
So just like that leaky roof,
Exactly.
technical debt requires extra effort and resources to fix later.
Yes.
Sometimes even more than if you had done it right the first time.
Absolutely. It can be a hidden cost that really adds up over time.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah,
It makes the concept of technical debt much clearer
it does.
and like highlights the importance of quality even when working quickly.
Exactly. And Scrum helps bring these potential pitfalls to light, encouraging teams to consider the long-term health and maintainability of their work, even when under pressure to deliver quickly.
This has been really insightful.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground
we have.
from like the basic principles of Scrum,
Yeah,
the importance of time boxing, the dangers of technical debt,
right.
and the idea of velocity as a measure of progress.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. So as we dive deeper into the world of Scrum,
Yeah.
what are some things for our listener to keep in mind?
Yeah, one thing to consider is this. Even though Scrum promotes a lot of autonomy within the team,
Yeah.
it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Okay.
The organization around the team also needs to support those Scrum values for it to truly thrive.
Right. So the broader organizational structure
Absolutely.
needs to support those values.
Think about it. If a team embraces self-organization,
Yeah.
but the broader organization still operates in a very top-down command and control way,
Yeah.
there's bound to be friction.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
The environment has to be conducive to the principles of Scrum for it to truly flourish.
It does.
I'm sure we'll unpack more of those organizational dynamics in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we'll dive deeper into that for sure.
But for now, let's take a quick pause and let our listener absorb all this awesome information.
Sounds good.
All right, welcome back. Let's keep going with this Scrum thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've talked a lot about the process,
Right.
the mechanics of it,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the human element?
Yeah,
How does Scrum impact team dynamics
that's a great question.
and collaboration?
That's actually one of the most fascinating aspects of Scrum.
Okay.
It's designed to foster self-organization within teams,
Oh,
which can be really empowering for the individuals involved.
how so?
Well, think about it. Instead of having a manager dictating every task,
Right.
the team collectively figures out how to best achieve the goals, leveraging each person's strengths and expertise.
So it's less about top-down control
Much less.
and more about creating a space
Exactly.
where the team can collectively problem solve
Yes.
and make decisions together.
It's about tapping into the collective intelligence of the team
Okay.
and creating a sense of shared ownership and accountability.
Okay.
When people feel like they have a voice and that their contributions are valued, they're more likely to be engaged and motivated, which ultimately leads to better outcomes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how does this play out in those high-pressure situations?
Right.
Like when deadlines are looming,
Yeah.
does self-organization just go out the window?
It's a good question. And actually, one of the strengths of Scrum is that it helps teams stay focused and productive, even under pressure.
Okay.
Remember those time box sprints we talked about?
Yeah.
They create a natural rhythm
Okay.
and help teams break down large, overwhelming tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
So it's about creating a sustainable pace.
Rather than like those frantic all-nighters we've all experienced.
Oh, that's
With traditional project management. Exactly. Scrum recognizes that people perform best when they have a clear understanding of what needs to be done, the autonomy to decide how to do it, and the support of their team.
okay.
It's not about eliminating pressure altogether,
Right.
but rather about channeling it in a way that leads to productive and sustainable outcomes.
That's really insightful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that I feel like often causes friction.
Okay.
Estimation.
Yeah.
Trying to predict exactly how long something will take
Right.
can be like a recipe for frustration
It can be.
and just endless debates.
Lots of debates.
How does Scrum handle that?
Yeah, you're right. Estimation can be a real sticking point.
Yeah.
Traditional methods often involve managers or experts making those estimates,
Right.
which can feel arbitrary and disconnected from the people actually doing the work. Scrum takes a different approach, encouraging the entire team to participate in the estimation process.
So it's more about collective wisdom
It is.
than relying on just a single person's guesstimate.
Exactly. And Scrum uses some really interesting techniques for this, like planning poker.
Planning poker.
Yeah, it's kind of like a game
Coffee.
where everyone throws in their estimate anonymously,
Okay.
and then you discuss the discrepancies.
Okay.
It's a fun and engaging way to surface different perspectives, hidden assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately arrive at a more accurate and realistic estimate.
I love that.
It's a good one.
It sounds like a much more transparent and collaborative
It is.
way to approach estimation.
Yeah,
But even with those techniques, sometimes things take longer than expected.
of course.
How does Scrum deal with
Right.
those inevitable setbacks,
Yeah.
changes in plans?
Well, Scrum is built on the idea that change is inevitable
Okay.
and that trying to rigidly stick to a plan is often futile.
Yeah.
Instead of fearing change, Scrum embraces it. Remember the product backlog?
Yeah.
It's a living document,
Right.
constantly being refined and reprioritized as new information comes in priorities, shift, or unforeseen challenges arise.
So it's about being adaptable and responsive
Is.
rather than panicking when things don't go exactly according to plan.
Exactly. Scrum provides a framework for adjusting course, gracefully incorporating those changes,
Yeah.
and ensuring that the team stays aligned on the most important goals, even when the path to get there might shift along the way.
This is making me rethink how I approach projects
It's a good framework to consider.
altogether. But I have to ask,
Yeah.
what about those times when a team just isn't gelling, when there's conflict
Yeah.
or a lack of communication?
Happens all the time.
Does Scrum have any
Sure.
tools or techniques
Yeah.
for addressing those messy human dynamics?
Absolutely. Scrum recognizes that teamwork isn't always sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
Conflict is inevitable,
Yeah.
and effective communication takes effort. That's why Scrum emphasizes regular check-ins and feedback loops.
Okay.
Those daily Scrum meetings we talked about,
Yeah.
they're not just about status updates.
Okay.
They're a chance for team members to connect,
Yeah.
share challenges, brainstorm solutions, and stay aligned.
So it's not about pretending that those issues don't exist.
No.
It's about creating a space to address them
Yes,
openly and constructively.
exactly. Each sprint ends with a sprint retrospective,
Okay.
where the team comes together to reflect on what went well, what could be improved, and how they can work more effectively together in the future.
So like a lessons learned.
Exactly. It's a chance to air grievances, celebrate wins, and collectively identify solutions to make the team stronger.
I can see how those regular retrospectives would be incredibly valuable.
They are.
It's like a built-in mechanism
It is.
for continuous improvement, not just for the product itself,
Right.
but for the team dynamics,
And so
the overall process.
Exactly. And it's not just about addressing the negative. Scrum also encourages teams to celebrate their successes, acknowledge each other's contributions, and build a sense of camaraderie.
Yeah.
You know, when you're working hard and making progress together, it's important to take the time to recognize those achievements and foster a positive and supportive team environment.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's about finding that balance
it is.
between continuous improvement
Mm-hmm.
and genuine appreciation
Yes,
for the hard work being done.
absolutely.
Let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Talk about something that I think often gets overlooked.
Okay.
Documentation.
Ah.
In my experience, documentation can be a real time suck,
It can be.
especially when you're trying to move quickly.
Right.
So how does Scrum handle that tension
Right.
between needing documentation
Yep.
and wanting to stay agile?
Yeah, that's a great question. Scrum recognizes that documentation is important,
Okay.
but it encourages a more pragmatic and value-driven approach.
Okay.
Instead of creating mountains of paperwork up front,
Yeah.
Scrum teams focus on documenting what's essential
Okay.
for understanding the work, making decisions, and ensuring continuity.
So it's about finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
between having enough documentation to be helpful
Right.
without getting bogged down
Yes.
in unnecessary detail.
Exactly. Scrum encourages teams to ask themselves,
Okay.
what's the minimum amount of documentation we need to be effective?
I like that.
It's about being strategic and focusing on the documentation that adds value without creating unnecessary overhead.
That's a refreshing perspective.
It is.
It's about being mindful of the purpose
Yeah.
of documentation
Mm-hmm.
and ensuring that it serves the team's needs
Yes.
rather than becoming a burden.
Exactly.
Let's talk about something that can really make or break a project.
Okay, what's that?
Communication.
Ah, yes, communication.
How does Scrum promote effective communication
Yeah.
within and beyond the team?
Scrum recognizes that communication is the lifeblood of any successful project. That's why it emphasizes face-to-face communication transparency and regular feedback loops.
Okay.
Those daily Scrum meetings we talked about,
Yeah.
they're not just about status updates.
Okay.
They're a chance for team members to connect, share challenges, brainstorm solutions, and stay aligned.
So it's about creating a communication-rich environment
It is.
where information flows freely.
Yes.
Everyone feels connected and informed.
Exactly. And it's not just about internal communication within the team.
Okay.
Scrum also encourages regular communication with stakeholders, ensuring they're kept in the loop.
Yeah.
Their feedback is incorporated.
Yeah.
And everyone is aligned on the vision and progress being made.
This is making me realize that Scrum is much more than just a set of processes.
It is.
It's a philosophy.
It is.
It's a way of thinking
And a mindset.
about work that prioritizes people, collaboration, and continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
But let's be realistic.
Okay.
Not every organization is ready to embrace such a radical shift.
Right.
So what are some of the challenges
Yeah.
organizations face when trying to implement Scrum effectively?
You're right. Adopting Scrum can be a big change for organizations that are used to traditional hierarchical ways of working.
Yeah.
One common challenge is resistance to change.
Okay.
You know, people can be comfortable with the status quo,
Right.
even if it's not particularly effective,
Yeah.
and change can feel threatening.
Yeah.
So it's important for organizations to communicate the benefits of Scrum, clearly involve people in the transition process, and provide the necessary training and support to help them adapt to the new ways of working.
So it's not just about rolling out a new process.
No, it's not.
It's about bringing people along
It is.
on the journey
Yeah.
and ensuring they understand the why
The why is crucial.
behind the change.
Absolutely. And it's also about recognizing that Scrum isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay.
What works for one team or organization might not work for another. It's important to be flexible, experiment, and adapt Scrum to fit your specific needs and context.
This has been so eye-opening.
It's a fascinating framework.
We've explored the human side of Scrum,
We have.
from fostering self-organization to managing conflict, the role of communication,
Right.
and the challenges of implementation.
And there's still so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
But this gives you a deeper understanding of what Scrum is really all about beyond those basic definitions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what's one key takeaway for our listener to ponder?
Think about this. Scrum isn't about perfection.
Okay.
It's about embracing imperfection, learning from mistakes, and constantly striving to improve. It's about creating a work environment where people feel empowered, supported, and motivated to do their best work, even when things get messy and unpredictable.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been uncovering all these layers of Scrum.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
From the core principles to how the human element plays a role.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of organizations, let's talk about organizational culture.
Okay.
Can Scrum thrive in any environment? Or does it require
Yeah, that's a great question.
specific cultural elements to really succeed?
The answer is, well, it's complicated.
All right.
Scrum isn't a magic bullet that you can just plug into any organization and expect instant results.
Right.
It's a framework that works best when the organizational culture aligns with its core values.
So what kind of culture is best for Scrum?
Think about those key principles we've discussed. Transparency, collaboration, self-organization, continuous improvement.
Yeah.
Those aren't just buzzwords.
Right.
They're fundamental ways of working that require a supportive environment to thrive.
So if an organization is very hierarchical,
Right.
siloed, and resistant to change,
Yeah.
Scrum might have a tough time.
Exactly. In those environments, Scrum can feel like a foreign language.
Yeah.
And people might resist adopting its practices.
Okay.
It's not that Scrum can't work in those situations,
Right.
but it requires a conscious effort to shift the culture, break down those silos, and create a more open and collaborative environment.
So it's not just about implementing the Scrum processes,
Yeah.
but about cultivating a culture that supports them.
It's like planting a seed.
Right.
You need the right soil and conditions for it to grow and thrive.
That's a great analogy.
And that cultural shift can be a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's often a necessary one for organizations that want to reap the full benefits of Scrum.
It makes sense.
Think about it. If you're constantly battling against the organizational current, it's going to drain your energy and make it much harder to achieve those positive outcomes that Scrum promises.
Totally. So it's about creating an ecosystem where Scrum can thrive.
Exactly.
Rather than jamming it into an environment that's working against it.
Absolutely.
But even in organizations with a good culture, implementing Scrum isn't always easy.
That's true.
So what are some common pitfalls that teams encounter?
One common pitfall is treating Scrum as a rigid set of rules to be followed blindly.
Right.
Remember, Scrum is a framework,
Yeah.
a set of guidelines, not a strict recipe.
Yeah.
It's important to be flexible, experiment, and adapt Scrum to fit your specific needs and context.
So it's more about understanding the principles behind it
Yes.
than just going through the motions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another common pitfall is focusing too much on the process and not enough on the people.
Right.
Scrum is all about empowering people to do their best work.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires trust, respect, and a supportive environment.
Yeah. So it's not just about following the steps.
Right.
It's about creating that culture
It is.
where people feel supported
Yeah.
and motivated.
And that leads to another common pitfall: lack of communication. Scrum emphasizes transparency and regular communication. But sometimes teams fall into the trap of assuming everyone is on the same page when they're not.
So those regular check-ins,
Yes.
the daily scrums, the sprint reviews, the retrospectives,
Yeah.
those are super important
They are crucial.
for keeping everyone aligned
Yeah.
and addressing issues before they become big problems.
Exactly. And it's not just about the quantity of communication, but
Yeah.
also the quality.
Right.
It's about creating a safe and supportive environment where people feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, ideas, and concerns, even when those thoughts and ideas might be different from the prevailing opinion.
So fostering that culture of open and honest communication,
It's essential for Scrum to truly thrive.
where different opinions are welcome
Yes.
as a chance to learn and grow.
Exactly. Scrum thrives on diverse perspectives
Yeah.
and encourages healthy debate. That's how you come up with innovative solutions and avoid falling into the trap of groupthink.
This has been incredible.
It has been a good deep dive.
We've explored the cultural considerations,
Yes.
the common pitfalls,
Yeah.
the importance of communication, trust, respect.
It's all connected.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's like one key takeaway
Yeah.
for our listener?
Think about this. Scrum is all about embracing change, learning from experience, and continuously improving.
Okay.
Those are principles that can be applied to any aspect of your work.
Right.
Whether you're managing a project, leading a team, or simply trying to improve your own personal productivity.
So it's about adopting that Scrum mindset,
It is.
that agility,
Yes.
and applying it to any challenge you face.
Exactly. And remember, Scrum isn't about perfection.
Wow.
It's about progress. It's about taking small steps, experimenting, learning, and constantly striving to be better.
That's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Scrum.
It's been a pleasure.
We've uncovered the core principles, the applications, and how humans interact with it all.
It's a fascinating framework.
And remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving.
Keep diving.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.